Now we're going to have a very special presentation. I'd like to welcome Alfred Spector, Vice President of Research and Special Initiatives at Google, where he's responsible not only for the research, but also for Google's open source university relations initiatives. He's also the Executive Engineering Lead for Google.org, which applies Google's strengths in information and technology to build products and advocate for policies that address global challenges. Previously, Dr. Spector was Vice President of Strategy and Technology at IBM. He received his PhD in computer science from Stanford and a bachelor's degree in applied mathematics from Harvard. He's a member of the National Academy of Engineering and a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Alfred Spector.
Hello, everyone. I am not a true expert in energy, so I can't spend too much of my talk discussing that with you, and I know that's why you're primarily here. But just let me start by saying that at Google, we do care a lot about energy. We have a history of that. One reason is, of course, our data centers use a lot of electricity. But I, as a computer scientist and hardware and engineering-oriented person, am very proud of the fact that we think our data centers are about twice as efficient as most other data centers. And we think that's had an effect of about $1 billion a year in savings at Google. So that's a very significant sum. And we think that power in data centers is going to be something that's extremely important moving forward. In fact, I think personally, as a computer scientist, even though we have trouble with Moore's law in terms of minimizing the dimensions of circuitry on silicon wafers and such things, I don't really think there's going to be any difficulty in continuing to grow geometrically the processing power of our large-scale computing systems. The only issue is going to be they use energy. So it's going to be extremely important to find ways of minimizing energy usage. In terms of that energy that we do use, we've procured 630 megawatts of wind power, and we've spent over $1 billion on renewable energy projects with 2 gigawatts of capacity. And we look for places where we can be innovative and try to catalyze movement. You can't walk around the Google campus in Mountain View without seeing lots of charging points. I think we have 700 of them across Google. And we have some fascinating internal projects in that. So we care a lot about it. I'm not the right spokesperson to go into the great depth on these things, but I probably am a spokesperson to talk about our approach to innovation, given my role as head of research, university relations, and such things. We're a pretty big company these days, and I will say we are consumed really at all levels of the company of how can we maintain velocity? How can we maintain our speed and our innovative edge? And it's something you have to think about every day and worry about every day, or it won't happen. So in this presentation, I wanted to mention a few things that I think really do impact us and that have changed since the days of Bell Labs or the traditional research groups in corporate America. So one of them is, of course, with all the connectivity in the globe, the instantaneous connectivity, we can connect within our own organization and to outside organizations truly more rapidly. I am based in New York. I'm on a video conference 5 or 6 hours a day in what I do, and not with one person, but with teams of people in ways that work. So you know how it used to be to do a video conference, you'd waste 25 minutes getting it set up? It's not true anymore. It's instantaneous and easy. It's not just, however, communications of that form, it's all the sharing of documents. We regularly and collaboratively write documents together, and we regularly and collaboratively develop software together across the whole company. Google's known as having one large collection of all the software, almost not all, but almost all of the software that runs Google, and it means our engineers, 20,000 of them, can collaborate together in ways that actually have been transformative in our productivity. But we also communicate with others outside of the company in similar mechanisms. We maintain enormous platforms where many people collaborate on open source software products, and we do this in a way generally that stays out of IP hell, which is actually very nice. So I think if we think about the past and say the days of Sir Isaac Newton, when the peer-reviewed paper was the way of communication, And that's how you had to communicate. Write a paper, get it peer reviewed, take a long time, then publish it, then try to reproduce results. Things can happen much, much faster. And if you eliminate that cycle time due to the lags of traditional communication mechanisms, innovation can really speed up. The second is that we have an enormous amount of connectedness of operational systems that we produce and that others produce in the world. So all the systems are connected together. The internet is this vast collection of interconnected systems. Our systems are connected to lots of users, maybe 1 billion users or something of that realm. In the case of Google, with energy systems, will also be connected to vast numbers of users. Increasingly, we hear about the Internet of Things and all the sensors that are connected to devices. Even cell phones, right, that report back GPS locations are in effect a sensor, continually monitoring, in effect, traffic on the nation's roads, providing very accurate traffic signals, and probably already reducing congestion based upon people looking at those traffic signals and taking alternate routes. So all this kind of connection leads to an enormous amount of information transfer. There's a vast amount of information moving around, and that allows science and engineering to be vastly more empirical on a millisecond basis, on a second basis, or even maybe on a weekly experimental kind of basis. So in my field of computer science, I would say that when I got my PhD, we were partially a field of mathematics, where we did the analysis of algorithms and of computational structures, and we were very strongly an engineering field where we abstracted ideas, we encapsulate them, we standardize them, and then we built things through reuse and modular construction. And that's the nature of the field. Computer science, since the early 1980s, when machine learning happened, and then with a catapult from the web, became an empirical discipline. So in fact, now computer science, if you do it well, and in fact, I think more and more sciences are empirically in nature, based upon what everyone now talks about as big data. But in my field, it's a fundamental paradigm shift. So it's a three-legged stool at this point. It leads to all opportunities for innovation because you gain instantaneous feedback on what's happening in systems. And it's happening more and more in every domain. A third thing that has happened, I think, certainly again in my field, but I'm sure it's true in energy in so many areas as well, certainly in large-scale grids and such things, is everything is now interconnected. And it's rather complicated because of that. So it's very difficult to say, we're going to have a few people in white coats that think the great thoughts, and then they'll go tell everybody else what to do, that have to just merely make things. We've known this in manufacturing, that manufacturing is actually just as hard as coming up with a design concept in the first place. We've known that in bridge design, that actually figuring out the construction engineering of the bridge may be just as hard as the design of the bridge in the first place. So that's led to a very interesting thought at Google, and it says we shouldn't try to segregate research, because it's not just a new algorithm, it's how that's going to affect the entire ecosystem of user interface and public policy and privacy and security and scalability and the like. So all of these things then come together, and what that means we've done is we've decided that we would organize research at Google extremely opportunistically. There are places where it makes sense to get together a small cadre of people that will focus on a new concept as a concept independent of the products that will fit. Sometimes that's right. Frankly, more often it makes sense to have those people that are embedded within the dream of some grand challenge that we're trying to go do, some new product or some grand challenge. And we organize what we say is opportunistically in whatever way makes sense. Now, some people decry this as the end of the great research labs, but I think in this world here that we have today, with all of the connectivity, with all the data, and in fact with the ability to create structures like this, it's actually far better. And we call that our hybrid research model. In fact, we wrote a paper, you can read it, that's in the Communications of the Association for Computing Machinery about 1.5 years ago that it was published. I'm the lead author on that. You can find it. Another thing that we've noted as well is that we can't assume all innovation comes internally. Of course, that's well known to all of you here. But in fact, it's quite interesting. It doesn't require us to do contract research elsewhere. We just give gifts to a lot of universities, and we fund, hundreds of university research projects every year. We very much are involved with the open source community. That's a very major source of innovation for us. We support about 1,000 students, young students, every summer in something called the Summer of Code, where they start learning to program in large collaborative programming projects. And usually those programming products will develop new tools or things that advance the field and advance us. Of course, we also buy companies. That's another form. So we look at innovation very broadly in the business and try to match a bunch of these things together. The thing I do that's perhaps the most fun is I lead our internship program. And we have 2,000 interns at Google in engineering every summer. And that's a huge form of innovation for us, because these young students from colleges and graduate programs around the world, and it's all around the world from China to the US and everywhere with some flow across country boundaries in the summer, we learn more from that than you can imagine. It's sort of the ultimate way of learning what the next generation wants and what they think. And of course, they don't know what they don't know, which is very good. It's extremely important that that's true. So these are some of the things that we think about. Another thing that's been an implication of this is that across our engineering team, since we don't isolate all the PhD research types in one place, the whole engineering team has, as a whole, out of about 20,000 people, 25 to 30% PhDs in the team. So we never have technology transfer problems. What we find, or not never is probably not the right term, but we rarely have technology transfer problems because the people that are in a product team say, wow, that's a great idea. We always wanted to work on that. Thanks for getting it started, which is just a great thing that doesn't always happen in other groups. Now, in terms of the paradigms of all of this, there are many paradigms that you can think of. Sometimes research teams in an organization like ours, we start the products and we build them, and in fact, we create them. We created Google Translate, which I suspect many of you have used in this room. And we only turned it over to a product group after it had, I don't know, hundreds of millions of users to run. We started our speech, all the speech work, which we think is state of the art. In fact, we think it's probably the best in terms of speech recognition accuracy. And that was started and, in fact, produced as a product until we eventually transferred it. Sometimes we don't transfer things, and we run them behind the scenes for a very long time. Sometimes we consult on projects. Sometimes we do the math or statistics. We organize in whatever way makes sense. Sometimes we join another team, or if we think we're going to do something completely different, we isolate ourselves, because it's a bit of an internal competition. So I feel we need that flexibility in order to do things very well. And it's turned out quite well. Sometimes the projects are driven by, here's a new project we want to go do. We want to go create Google Glass, so we have to do work in vision. We have to do work in low power consumption. We have to do work in efficient ways of getting audio to someone. We have to worry about privacy. That's the driving factor. Sometimes it comes from an algorithm. We think there's a better machine learning algorithm. We're not really sure where it's going to be useful, and we pursue the algorithm. An interesting one is this. Optical character recognition is one of the kind of oldest fields of image processing that sort of looks artificial intelligence-like in the field. It's been done for decades. And it built up over many years and is rather good today. You, of course, see it in check processing and all sorts of things on a regular basis. Some team members I had just had the concept that you could apply speech recognition technology to optical character recognition. That if you could take a collection of coded files and a collection of the print version of those and just correlate them and say, here's millions of documents that look like this when they're printed, and here's the input that generated them, you could automatically build a machine which recognizes them. And it turns out to be true, and it turns out to be state of the art, and it will vastly simplify the whole field of OCR. That wasn't done with the goal of starting a whole new thing. It was a way of looking and seeing whether statistical speech recognition and translation technologies could be applied in an entirely new domain. Well, where is all this going to lead? Where do we need to think that we have to be really fast on things? So one is we certainly believe that distributed computing, these large-scale computation systems, are going to continue to grow geometrically over the next years. They're going to continue to grow at a very rapid rate. So when you think about it, you put multiple processors on a chip, and you put multiple chips on a board, and you put multiple boards in a rack, and then you multiply them times rows and by columns. These are very large numbers that come about in a data center. And it seems to me, with innovations in processor design, where the processors become smaller, innovations in optical interconnection and interconnection, there's really nothing that I can see for the next 10 years that will prevent continuing very rapid growth. Now, people worry about whether clouds will be secure. We always worry about security and privacy-related issues, and they're, of course, real, but they're real security and privacy-related issues with everything. So people will have to make balances and decide that the clouds are, in fact, really secure. We think there's going to be a huge amount, but think about where that goes. When there are a billion processors in a cloud, how do you manage that? How do you optimize the use of that? How do you minimize energy consumption? Not everything is always needed. These are fascinating questions in the core of computer systems. So I see vast progress that's going to be made and kind of enormously interesting problems. A second thing I think that we're still looking to do, the grand challenge of artificial intelligence, is really understand every type of communication to a system, be able to reply in any modality, whether an image, a picture, a video, or audio, text, be able to understand every document. So for example, if I have a picture on a beautiful spring day of a couple in front of the Empire State Building, what is that a picture of? Right? We could do probably technology for facial recognition. A lot of it exists. We don't ship it for privacy reasons in that kind of a world, but we could do the facial recognition, but that's not what the picture's about. It's not recognizing the Empire State Building. We could do that. It's about a honeymoon, right, in New York in April, or love or something. How do we do that? We need to learn to do that. So I think this kind of general understanding of everything is, I don't know if it's within reach, but we know the steps to take for the next 10 years that will continue to make progress on it. And if you have any questions of whether it's sort of real, try to talk to one of the Google products and ask it hard questions. And you'll begin to see glimmers of intelligence in these things, I believe. A third thing that I think is really interesting is what you might call collaborative intelligence. Our computers learn from users on a regular basis. And we then improve the operation of our systems. They become more useful, more users use them, and then we learn more, and this virtuous circle continues. An example is spelling correction. So you might think that Google has linguists in every language that work on understanding common spelling problems so that we can correct things for you. In fact, it's all learned from all of the spelling mistakes and corrections that the whole world makes. And we learn extremely rapidly how to spell the name of a new senator that's running for president, which would probably not otherwise have been known to many people. And just a few people figure it out, and we can learn, our systems learn from that and automatically do spelling. How far we can capture this hybrid intelligence, or this collaborative intelligence notion is probably a better term, how we can capture this to do more and more is a really interesting question. In the domains of impact, we see huge opportunities in education. All this, you've seen the MOOCs, you've seen the Khan Academy. We announced our first course offering that uses XBlocks from the edX consortium just yesterday on big data. You can find it on our website. There's a huge amount with the MOOC technology. There are commercial concerns like Coursera and Udacity and others. It's a hugely and wonderful space where I think we can get very good outcomes and lower costs, and that's critical to everyone's view of the future. But there's a lot more to be done. We have to make the systems adaptive so that they react to what people learn and the speed at which they learn. We have to make them collaborative, so we use social networking because all of us really enjoyed being in class, probably more because of our friends in the class than the teacher. And then finally, we have to also make them immersive so that they're like video games or 747 flight simulators. And I think we'll do that. That's part of the agenda. We have to do this in healthcare. I think there's lots of opportunity that is happening in this space. And then in energy, as we have so many different sources of energy, this distributed grid notion, all the optimization and control that we can do to lower consumption and get power from the right places, create better marketplaces, I think there's tremendous opportunity there as well. I think we're going to need collaborative research models that are very flexible if we're going to attack these big systems problems with all of the different kind of skills that are needed. And I hope that the kinds of things we're doing at Google are possibly relevant to what all of you are thinking about as you think about innovation in the future. So without that, I have to say thank you for your time, and I wish you a continuing great conference. Thanks.